You know, if you work in home infusion intake management, I guarantee you've heard this sentence. Actually, scratch that. You've probably said it yourself. She's doing great. She's already handling referrals on her own. People usually drop this line right around week 3 of a new hire's tenure. But well, I'm here to tell you that this seemingly positive sentence is literally the most dangerous phrase in your entire organization. Why? Because you're saying it way before the first prior authorization she submitted has even been adjudicated. You're saying it before Miss Secondary Payer has had time to generate a massive retroactive recoupment. The reality is, at week 3, she isn't doing great or poorly yet because the actual financial outcomes of her decisions just haven't arrived.
So welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack exactly why the first 90 days of intake training systematically lock in your organization's denial rates for the next 2 to 3 years. And this isn't just some rhetorical flourish. We're talking about a highly specific, mechanical failure that is quietly leaking revenue right out of your system. We're diving underneath all those standard failure categories to look at the single point in your organization's life cycle where these really expensive errors get planted.
Okay, here is a quick look at how we'll break this down today. We've got the familiarity trap, 3 failed training models, the 90-day cliff, the cost of bad habits, the reverse shadow diagnostic, and finally, better infrastructure. Let's dive in.
Starting us off with Section 1, the familiarity trap, or the hidden danger of early independence.
So this false confidence we just talked about, it builds because of what we call the structural delay. Think of it like this. Intake decisions are made today, right? But their financial consequences absolutely do not surface until weeks later. If your new hire makes a coordination of benefits gap mistake in week 1, that denial won't actually hit your billing team until week 8. But by week 3, well, everyone is patting themselves on the back because she's moving fast. Onboarding is where this structural delay is incredibly dangerous, because everybody essentially stops watching right before the consequences actually arrive.
Moving on to Section 2, 3 failed training models and why standard defaults expose you to so much risk.
What's really fascinating here is that when we think we're training someone, we usually default to some pretty deeply flawed models. First up is the shadow model. You know the drill. You put a new hire next to your best veteran. Let's call her Sarah. But here's the catch. Sarah isn't teaching the documented process. She's teaching her process, complete with 5 years of personal workarounds. If Sarah skips checking secondary payers to save time, guess what? Your new hire learns to skip it too. You've literally just cloned Sarah's blind spots. Then you've got the binder model. You hand them a massive binder of payer policies, they read it, and boom, you check training complete. But reading comprehension is definitely not the same as live judgment under pressure. They might ace a written quiz, but they're going to completely freeze when facing a live IVIG referral with missing step therapy documentation. And then, of course, we have model number 3, sink or swim. You give them a brief orientation, a login, and pretty much just say, hey, ask if you have questions. This happens all the time during high census periods when you just desperately need an extra set of hands. But the crucial takeaway here is that under this model, your coordinators aren't actually learning your clean claim process. They're just developing survival strategies. They learn exactly enough to avoid being corrected today, which, as you can imagine, is a complete game changer in the worst way possible for your long-term revenue.
Which brings us to Section 3, the 90-day cliff. This is when support vanishes and consequences arrive.
So during the first 30 to 60 days of onboarding, structured support is pretty high. But right around that day 90 mark, that support completely falls off a cliff. The coordinator is declared independent. But remember that structural delay we talked about earlier? Day 90 is exactly when the evidence of their onboarding quality actually begins hitting billing. An authorization expiration date that they set incorrectly back in week 3 suddenly comes due in week 7 or 8. So the structure vanishes right at the exact moment the consequences start rolling in. It means nobody is watching closely enough to catch the pattern.
And this right here is the absolute most critical takeaway. Once a habit survives that 90-day window uncorrected, it doesn't just magically fix itself. Nobody flags it anymore because she's no longer considered the new girl. She is just executing how things are done. The average tenure for an intake coordinator is what, 2 to 4 years? That means those completely uncorrected mistakes become her permanent professional instincts for the next several years. You have effectively locked in your error rate.
Let's look at Section 4, the cost of bad habits. We're going to calculate the hard financial reality of unstructured training. Okay, let's break down a realistic scenario. Imagine a standard team handling 150 claims a month. A new hire takes on about 25% of that. Over their 90-day ramp, they're going to handle roughly 113 claims. Now, a fully trained veteran might have a 10% denial rate, right? But an unstructured new hire, they sit at around 25%. That is a massive 15% excess denial rate. If we apply that 15% to their 113 claims, they generate about 17 excess denials that a trained person would have easily caught. And even with a decent 35% recovery rate,
At an average of $2,400 a lesson, those 17 excess denials equal a $26,520 unrecoverable loss per new hire. Let that sink in for a second. Every single time you hire someone without structured onboarding, you are carrying over $26,000 in totally preventable exposure in just their first 90 days. Meaning, if you hire just 2 people a year, that carries over $50,000 in preventable exposure. And remember, that doesn't even count the years of uncorrected habits that follow them after they hit that 90-day cliff. So how do we spot this? Section 5, the reverse shadow diagnostic. This is a live, in-the-moment observation.
instead of looking backwards at past claims, I want you to try a live observation. Have a supervisor silently observe a 60 to 90-day employee process 2 complex prior authorizations from start to finish. And here's the key. Do not help them unless they get completely stuck. Just grade them silently against these 4 criteria. Number 1, did they systematically check for a secondary pair? 2, did they actually use a specific written documentation checklist, or were they just winging it from memory? 3, did they set a clear, centralized tracking alert for auth expiration? And 4, when info was missing, did they follow a defined escalation protocol, or did they just leave a single voicemail and move on?
Now tally up the score. If they execute all 4, great. Protect your infrastructure. It's working beautifully. If they miss 1 or 2, you are already inside the shadow model's failure pattern. But if they miss 3 or 4 of these steps, you aren't just looking at a struggling employee. Your entire onboarding process is an illusion. You are literally watching untrained staff handle live fire scenarios, and an explosion in your denial queue is absolutely imminent.
Let's fix it. Section 6. Building better onboarding infrastructure with a 5-component solution.
All right, here's the 5-part gold standard framework. Step 1, payer-specific pre-live training. Generic training just doesn't cut it anymore. Step 2, a simulation library. This one is a real game changer. You let new hires train on fictional referral packets that are intentionally seeded with common errors, letting them make every predictable mistake in a completely consequence-free environment. Step 3 is a structured competency checkpoint. Step 4 is a denial feedback loop, so they actually learn when a claim comes back unpaid weeks later. And finally, Step 5, extended 90 to 180-day monitoring to actually bridge that 90-day cliff gap.
Now, I want to zero in on Step 3 for just a second, because this concept perfectly captures why it is absolutely crucial to protecting your revenue. When you implement a 100% QA review window before a prior authorization is ever submitted, yes, you do slow down intake slightly. But catching an error on day 15 costs maybe 5 minutes of coaching. Catching that exact same error on day 75, that costs a $2,400 unrecoverable denial. The math simply demands structured observation.
For teams wanting a literal implementation template rather than just, abstract components, the source material outlines some structured options that reset what done right means across every experience level in your organization. Things like the 88-point intake accuracy accelerator diagnostic, a structured 90-day accelerator program, or even a VIP team intensive where your entire team processes complex referral scenarios simultaneously. These are specifically designed to build out your pair-specific curriculum and your simulation libraries for you.
As we wrap up this explainer, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. I want you to think back to a recent hire who just never quite got it, or maybe a denial pattern that keeps mysteriously reappearing every single time you onboard someone new. The next time you're tempted to blame a new hire for struggling, ask yourself, did they actually fail? Or did your onboarding system set them up to fail, quietly cloning bad habits and costing you $26,000 a pop? It might be time to fix the system. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.